Hello and welcome to Original Soundchat, where video game music is a work of art. On each episode, it's our goal to help you learn about 2 soundtracks from the world of games, as well as the people, stories, and critical tracks behind them. My name is Joe DeVader.
And I'm Peter Spezia. We're brought to you by Anonymous Dinosaur and Rhymes with Asia. It's time to appreciate great OSTs and the games that they come from, without getting too bogged down in music theory. Joe, what are this week's games?
Up first is 2003's Fatal Frame 2 Crimson Butterfly, often lauded as one of the scariest games ever made, featuring 2 twins who must escape a haunted village and the murderous ritual they wish to recreate.
Following that is the multiplayer omnibus experience on Super Nintendo. That is Masahiro Sakurai's definitive creation for the pink puffball, 1996's Kirby Super Star. I am in a hotel room just outside of Asheville, North Carolina, so another fun recording on a business trip in a hotel, so appreciate you understanding the different microphone and all of that going on. These 2 games this week, an interesting pairing for sure, but I feel like the only thing we could come up with was that they are games that have different names in each of the 3 major regions of Japan, North America, and Europe. They're all known by different things.
Yeah, which I actually did not know the third name of my game. I knew the second, but not the third, and that's really interesting.
Yeah, and it was certainly something to learn for me about Kirby Super Star as well. Joe, how are you doing? What are you playing?
I'm not allowed to talk about most of the games I'm playing right now, because they all come out either tomorrow at time of release or the next day. But one I can talk about is I've been playing a visual novel that is being published by Square that was in the Japanese version of the Nintendo Direct, the last Direct, but not in ours for some reason. It's called Paranormasight. It's a horror-themed game. I am allowed to talk about it a little bit because we're past the preview embargo. It's neat. It's really neat, actually. It's had a lot of moments of really interesting solutions to things. The idea behind the game is a bunch of people get the power of these curses that can kill somebody if a certain thing happens or a certain condition is met. And one of them, to stop it from killing the character I was playing as, I had to go into the game's settings menu and mess with volume options. And that was the solution. And there's been a ton of stuff like that, or like stuff that you can only do if you have knowledge that the character doesn't have, but you do. Stuff like that. It's really, really neat so far. Hopefully, the hope is that tomorrow, when this episode comes out, tomorrow I should have the review out, but I don't know if that will be the case. It will be out in the next couple days, though, at least.
I don't think I've really been playing anything. Work's been a lot lately, though I'm looking forward to continuing Persona 5 Strikers, because that's been on the mind of like, oh yeah, they're starting to ramp up, or at least try to start to tell maybe the process toward an end game before I'm sure they ultimately reveal that it's this god that is messing around with things. Haha, but we'll see how that goes. It's got plenty to play for sure, so there's no shortage of that. Let's bring up a couple of composer follow-up news. We got a couple headlines from the game industry, and certainly brings in the work of plenty of composers that we've talked about before on the show. We've talked about how we still have a couple of the big game awards still to get to, and one of those is the BAFTAs. The BAFTAs for games. Their nominees just went live a few days ago as of time of recording, and the show is March 30th. So, for the category of Best Game, the nominees are Cult of the Lamb, Elden Ring, God of War Ragnarok, Marvel Snap, Stray, and Vampire Survivors. Good mix of some indies there. Nice to see Marvel Snap as a mobile game inclusion, but
I think this is the first time I've seen Have anybody else put Vampire Survivors down in like their Game of the Year category?
Game of the Year? I don't think so.
Because I've seen a couple people like kind of upset about that, because for a lot of people that's one of the best games that came out last year.
But like, it won Action Game at DICE, so it's not like it's been totally snubbed.
Mm-hmm.
And then for music, nominees are A Plague Tale Requiem, Cuphead The Delicious Last Course, God of War Ragnarok, Stray, and Tunic. I could totally see this going 3 for 3 once again, where God of War Ragnarok wins Best Music, but then Best Game goes to Elden Ring.
I could see that happening 100%, yeah. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and say that's probably what's going to happen. Meanwhile, in Game Pass news, Guilty Gear Strive is now out on Game Pass, where I just installed Soul Hackers 2 the other day, despite being warned several times that it's not worth my time. That will never stop me. But unfortunately, Guilty Gear Strive coming means that Game Pass must always also take away. So games that are leaving Game Pass on March 16th include Undertale, Zero Escape, the Nonary games, Paradise Killer, and Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy, just to name the games we have talked about on this show. I'm glad that I actually, like a month ago, bought Nonary games on Steam when it was on sale for like $5.
Ooh,
so
smart. Good deal for that. Absolutely.
So I dodged that bullet there, so I'll still be able to play that at least.
But yes, a good game to bring to Game Pass. But yes, that's a lot of heavy hitters leaving the service. That's sad to see.
You still got time to play Paradise Killer. Maybe it's not. I won't call it short, but it's not long, I guess. I don't know. All right, let's get into our first game, which is, I think, maybe the most thematically mismatched game, or like, I guess, tonally mismatched game we have had paired with a Kirby game since Devil May Cry 3.
All the way back when.
All the way back when. We're going to talk about Fatal Frame 2 Crimson Butterfly, which was released on November 27th, 2003 in Japan for the PlayStation 2. North America got a release on December 10th, 2003. And then Europe got it April 30th, 2004. There was a director's cut that was released on the Xbox on November 1st, 2004 in North America. Japan would then get it on November 11th, 2004. And then Europe would have to wait until February 4th, 2005 to get it. A remake, which I did not know this, was released for the Wii in 2012, but only in Europe and Japan. We did not get it over here. And the original was made available on PSN for the PlayStation 3 in 2013. As we mentioned at the top of the show, it's got a different name in the other two major regions. In Japan, the Fatal Frame series is known as Zero, while in Europe, it is called Project Zero. So, the more you know. I did not know about it being called Zero in Japan, but Project Zero was a name that I have heard many times when people talk about Fatal Frame.
And still, Fatal Frame makes the most sense for what the game is.
Fatal Frame is named after a mechanic in the game. Like, there's a mechanic called Fatal Frame in the game. I mean, there must be some copyright thing either here or in Japan or in Europe. It was developed and published by Tecmo in Japan and in North America, but the European PS2 version was actually published by Ubisoft, with the European Xbox version being published directly by Microsoft Game Studios. It is the second game in Koei Tecmo's survival horror series, which usually involves people exploring decrepit and haunted locations and fighting off ghosts through the use of the Camera Obscura. During normal gameplay, the player just has direct control of the main character and can wander around environments in third person. You collect items, you find clues as to where to go next, you solve puzzles, etc., etc. It's your standard survival horror experience. But during combat, the player can enter Viewfinder mode, which pulls out the Camera Obscura and basically turns into combat Pokemon Snap. Perspective goes into first person, and ghosts can be defeated by lining them up in frame, waiting for the shutter to completely load, and taking their picture. The more the shutter is allowed to load, the more damage the picture will do, but you can also do extra damage if you take a picture right before the ghost attacks you, which will then cause a fatal frame sequence that will allow you to rapidly take more pictures of the ghost to do more damage. And you can determine the best moment based on the filaments on the side of the lens that light up and fill as the moment approaches and the longer you have the ghost in frame. The Camera Obscura can also be equipped with power-up lenses that have effects on the ghosts, such as slowing them down or pushing them further away from you. The camera also requires film, much like ammo in a shooter. There is a weak standard type of film that you have an infinite amount of, but you can find stronger film that you have finite amounts of. And you can find that as you go throughout the game. So the story of Fatal Frame, which it's kind of weird to me that I've never brought this series to the show, but then I remember that I played my first Fatal Frame game like last year or 2 years ago when 5 was re-released on the Switch. So that's the only one I have played up to this point. The story of Fatal Frame 2. When twins Mio and Mayu Amakura visit their favorite childhood playspot in the fictional Japanese region of Minakami, Mayu gets distracted by a red butterfly and follows it into the woods. Worried for her sister's safety, Mio follows her. The two find themselves in the abandoned All Gods village and find that it is in fact not abandoned, but instead inhabited by the vengeful spirits of the people who once lived there, seemingly trapped, reliving the events that led to their death. When Mayu wanders further into the village, Mio must search to find her. Along the way, she begins to learn about the village's history, and most importantly, the sacrificial ritual they did in the past that involved a pair of twins. So the questions become, why have the Amakura twins been lured into this haunted village? Can they successfully exorcise the spirits and escape with their lives and souls intact? And what is the significance of the Crimson Sacrifice ritual, and how does it relate to the cause of the village's doom? This is where I will ask, what are your experiences with Fatal Frame 2, or I guess Fatal Frame in general?
Yeah, very little experience with Fatal Frame. I've seen gameplay, so I think your assessment of Pokemon Snap-like combat is accurate, though... Yeah, definitely a different context to that for sure. It was nice to see Fatal Frame's spirits appear in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate and get a kind of recognition there.
And an assist trophy.
Yeah, oh, that's right. An assist trophy too. You're absolutely right. So, yeah, to get that kind of recognition is neat, but yeah, no experience with the franchise, much less this game that I guess I've heard of in the context of oh yeah, scary games, but little else beyond that.
So Fatal Frame 2 is a game I've kind of always wanted to play, but never gotten around to. Fatal Frame is a series I've wanted to try for years, and the opportunity never arose to do so until I ended up reviewing the Wii U one that got ported to Switch and literally everything else. In 2021, which was Maiden in the Blackwater 5. It was fine. 5 was fine, I guess. But 2 is one that comes up a lot when people talk about, these are some of the scariest games ever made. These are some of the best horror games you will ever play, and Fatal Frame 2 is almost always on that list. So it is one that I've always wanted to give a try. And maybe one day I will, but I have not played it up to this point. And I hope to at some point. And the reason I did Fatal Frame 2 for this instead of Fatal Frame 4, which is the one that is coming out here this week on Thursday, I don't know, 2's the one I wanted to learn about more than 4. So that's why I chose to do it. I'm pretty sure I owned it on PS3 and just never loaded it up. As I do with most games on most of the platforms that I buy them on. So, let's talk about the history of Fatal Frame 2. The original Fatal Frame was released in 2001, and development of a sequel began very shortly thereafter. Apparently, the reason that this game has a much more involved narrative than the first game is because, when asked, many players told Koei that they did not finish the first game because it was too scary. So, instead of making it less scary, what they did was give it a very detailed narrative so that players would be like, I'm terrified, but I want to see what happens next. Which is not the worst way of doing that, honestly, if you're still looking to make a horror game. Even so, they decided that the focus of the game would still be on horror, more so than action, and one producer referred to the horror of Fatal Frame as, quote, horror that appeals to the human imagination, with the inspiration for this quote and the philosophy being the fact that people get scared by things like faint noises in the dark. Peter, do you know one of the bedrock rules of horror?
It would be never show the monster.
Pretty much. The idea is that anything your imagination comes up with is gonna be scarier than somebody else's creation.
Yeah. I mean, that's Cloverfield to a T. That's why the Psycho sequence is so effective, because you never actually see the stabbing itself. You just imagine it, and it's much more gruesome that way.
Mm-hmm. So they wanted to sort of tap in to that. They also took this opportunity and that thought process to change how the spirits behaved in comparison to the first game. I didn't know they moved differently in the first game, but in Fatal Frame 2, they were given the ability to vanish and reappear somewhere else, and some of them even leave a lingering effect on the area they were in even after they've been defeated. A central theme of the story is symmetry, hence butterflies and twins being big thematic parts of the story, as well as the narrative being about history attempting to repeat itself. Producer Keisuke Kikichi described the inspiration for this being that, quote, tragedies and fear are based on what happens when you tear things apart. So the idea of tearing two symmetrical things apart. Two major inspirations for the game were cited as the works of novelist Seishi Yokomizo, as well as the film The Shining. That second one makes sense. I don't know much about the first one, but that second one makes sense. And it reviewed pretty well upon release. PS2 sits at 81, the Xbox version sat at an 84 on Metacritic, generally ranked as one of the scariest games ever made, and is largely considered among the best titles in the Fatal Frame series. Neil Druckmann has been quoted as saying Crimson Butterfly is, quote, the scariest kind of experience in any medium. I haven't seen a movie that comes close. So, Neil Druckmann of Naughty Dog fame, they're giving his thumbs up to how damn scary Fatal Frame 2 is. The only awards info I could find was that it was a nominee for GameSpot's Best Adventure Game in 2004, and it lost that award to Myst 4 Revelation. A director's cut released on Xbox in 2004, which adds improved visuals, as well as the ability to play the entire game in first person, a survival mode, a new ending, and more alternate costumes for the twins that could be unlocked. And in Koei tradition, some of them are weird and not in the fun way. Like the dominatrix outfits you can unlock if you beat the game in nightmare mode. Main characters of this game are teenagers, by the way. Fatal Frame 2 was remade for the Wii in 2012, titled Project Zero 2 Wii Edition. This version was only released in Japan and Europe, as I mentioned earlier. And Fatal Frame sorta continues. Fatal Frame 3 The Tormented, released on PlayStation 2 in 2005. Fatal Frame 4 Mask of the Lunar Eclipse, released exclusively in Japan for the Wii in 2008. However, as of this week, it will no longer be Japan exclusive. This Thursday, March 9th, for the first time ever, Fatal Frame 4 will release in all regions for Switch, PS4, PS5, Xbox One and Series X and S, and PC. And the last new release in the series was Fatal Frame 5 Maiden of the Black Water, which released for the Wii U in 2014, the main character of which appears as an assist trophy in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, where she can attack players using the Camera Obscura. And the series is often included among names like Resident Evil and Silent Hill as one of the bigger horror franchises in video games. The ownership of this series is a mystery to me, because at one point, apparently after Fatal Frame 5 came out, they asked the head of the series, what are the chances of another game soon? And his answer was, that is up to Nintendo. To which many people responded, wait, what? Does Nintendo own Fatal Frame? And for a while, that seemed to be the case. And then Maiden of the Black Water came out on everything. Not just the Switch. I have no idea who owns this franchise anymore. I don't know why he said it was up to Nintendo before that. I think they might have like a partial ownership of the series now somehow. I don't know. It's bizarre. It's the weirdest ownership mystery in video games right now, I think. In terms of composer, let's talk about Ayako Toyoda. Or at least, I bet you'd really like it if I talked about Ayako Toyoda, and I would too, but unfortunately, literally the only information I could find on her as a person is that she is still working at Koei Tecmo's sound team today. She has quite a discography, though. The first thing that Moby Games credits her with is the game Kagero Deception 2, which was a 1998 PS1 game. She did sound on Monster Rancher 2, did the music on Gallop Racer 2001. She has worked on the music for every Fatal Frame game except for 4, which, fun fact, the person who did Fatal Frame 4 in her stead was Masafumi Takada.
Oh, interesting.
Alongside Etsuko Ichikawa, but Masafumi Takada got top billing in there. That's the only one she's never worked on. And that's a hell of a name to get for the one you can't have your usual composer to work on. She also did the music for Spirit Camera, The Cursed Memoir, which is considered a part of the Fatal Frame series. But it's not called Fatal Frame, so it's really confusing, but it is generally considered to be a part of the series. She did sound design on One Piece Pirate Warriors 1 and 2, sound editing on Pokemon Conquest. She is credited with the music for Dead or Alive 5, Warriors Orochi 3 Ultimate and 4, Dynasty Warriors Godseekers. She did audio design on both Neo games. She did the music for Warriors All-Stars, as well as doing the music for Atelier, Lydier, and Suele.
Oh, continue the subtitle.
The Alchemists and the Mysterious Paintings. As well as sound design on Atelier, Ryza, Everdarkness, and The Secret Hideout. We're not going to be able to avoid the Atelier games forever. I've had 2 separate people say we should do one of them. And they terrify me. I know nothing about those games.
But how will those titles ever fit into a podcast title? And its character limitations.
And they're all like that. That's the best part. Every single one of them.
I know, that's the point. We're screwed.
There's like 1,000 of them, and they all sound like that. In terms of historical development research, I couldn't really find anything about the development of the music, but one thing I noticed while doing a listen through, one, I don't think this game ever got a official soundtrack release, ever. At least, there doesn't seem to be one listed anywhere, and the only ones I could find online were direct game rips. Surprisingly, as you'll hear in some of the tracks, the whispers and the talking from the spirits that you encounter aren't separate audio files, I guess. They're baked into the music, which must have been like a memory saving thing or something. I don't know. In a way, though, I think that's actually kind of interesting for our purposes specifically, because it really kind of helps bring across the general sound atmosphere of what playing Fatal Frame sounds like. It's not every track, but you will hear it a couple of times, and I do think it is kind of interesting. Really weird that it is baked in and not just like a sound source on the Ghost itself. But the PlayStation 2, I guess. So let's get into those 5 critical tracks. The first one being one that sounds nothing like I expected Fatal Frame to sound like from what I knew about it. This is critical track number 1, Crimson Butterfly. I believe this is the title screen music. And this is some JRPG menu screen sounding music. It does not sound like what I expected Fatal Frame to sound like. It definitely has a sort of like minor key feeling to it, but like it genuinely feels like it was made for a game in a different genre. It's good, but this is not what I picture or think of when I think of Fatal Frame at all.
Yeah, you just came off of playing Fire Emblem.
Yeah, it sounds like Fire Emblem. I'm glad your head went to the same place.
Right? Like the little triumphant like it's not, the Fire Emblem theme, but like I could see it in that context. Granted, later in the piece you're getting different instruments that'll help kind of steer it back towards Fatal Frame, but you're right. Why am I not surprised? It feels like, PS2 games of this era like have this as like their opening theme or their main menu theme, where it's like the first bit of the piece starts out one way and then it takes a weird hard shift in some other direction. I don't know. It feels like that's a thing of the times.
A very PlayStation 2 format for a song to be in. Yeah, I think I can think of a couple of games that have a very similar feel to that, but like this is the one that more than anything has elicited the response of, that doesn't sound like it's from this game. It doesn't sound like anything else on the soundtrack either. So as you'll see with critical track number 2, as we get a little bit closer to what you might think of when you think of Fatal Frame, this is Festival. Now, you probably heard Festival and thought, oh, I like festivals. Those are fun. No, not here. I don't know where the next 3 tracks play. I can take a guess, but I do not know for sure because I have not played the game. This is near the beginning of the soundtrack, so I assume it's one of the earlier cutscenes, but it's just these haunting, sort of traditional sounding Japanese vocals and some traditional sounding Japanese percussion. And this is a bit closer to what I expect from the music when I think about Fatal Frame than the opening titles would have led me to believe. So it gets on track later, at least.
Yeah, we're much closer on track here, but I still think of like, it gives me like Gregorian chant vibes, and then I'm like, is this what the Halo theme would sound like if it was trying to creep you out?
That's a pretty good comparison. What if the Halo theme oh man, Alex McCullough, you need to get on that. What if the Halo theme was a theme for a horror game?
We're going to drop it down a couple steps, we shift into more of a minor key.
If anybody could do it, it's him.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, I mentioned whispers. And the next 2 tracks are where we're going to hear that for the most part. The one that I think stood out to me the most as, oh, this is an atmosphere that is probably terrifying in-game, is critical track number 3. This is Villagers. So just these heavy drum beats that are like a distance from you as just what sounds like a bunch of people ask, where did you go? Why are you running? You won't escape. That's Fatal Frame, baby. That's it. And I can only imagine like the exact scenario this plays in is probably very stressful. And probably quite scary. And so it stood out to me in that specific way. But this is the kind of thing you're going to hear when you play a Fatal Frame game, more often than not, when ghosts show up.
Yeah, this is right up the alley of what I'd imagine based on all the descriptions so far. And, that does give you the creeps for sure. I think it's important to highlight this as an example of not really using any melody, but still just pumping up the creepy atmosphere and really playing into this game's strengths.
Because it should be noted, at least this is the case for 5. When there aren't ghosts, or there's not a cutscene, there is no music. There is just ambiance and sound, which is a usual tactic to make sure that scares hit with maximum force when suddenly there is not silence.
As we've learned from Akira Yamaoka.
Yeah, he has that great quote about the absence of sound being very important to atmosphere. For critical track number 4, this is another one involving the whispers. This one, I think, is creepy in a different way. This is Crimson Kimono. Let me tell you, there ain't nothing creepier than a little girl crying. That's one of the creepier sounds you can hear in like a dark abandoned place. Left 4 Dead knew about that. Silent Hill knows about that. And Fatal Frame knows about that too. Based on some comments on YouTube, I could sort of piece together where this plays. Seemingly the ghost of a little girl who got separated from her brother. And man, little kid ghosts are creepy. They're really creepy. And this song is a great example of why. But also just sad. The Fatal Frame ghosts are kind of sad because they don't want to be like this. And they're kind of just forced to relive their death over and over again and kind of driven mad by that. And this is, I think, a very good representation of that as well.
I think it goes to show that for all of the horror games that have been brought up on this show, most of them that you have brought to the table, I don't think we have had a more unsettling theme on this show. Like, I am thoroughly creeped out right now.
It is powerful. The sound of crying children is very powerful. And all the Fatal Frames have it, as far as I'm aware. 5 had one in a room full of dolls, which, no thanks.
Nope,
I'm good.
Nope.
I'm all good. Thank you for offering. Critical track number 5, though, complete departure from all of that, but something I did not know existed that is a very big part of Fatal Frame. This is Cho. So this is a pop song, as some people might have heard. It is the credits of Fatal Frame 2, written and performed by Tsukiko Amano. And apparently, this was the start of a tradition for the series, having a theme song of this kind, almost all of which have been done by Tsukiko Amano. She appears to be to Fatal Frame what Utada Hikaru is to Kingdom Hearts. And I didn't know they had their own equivalent of that. But also, this song is really good. Like, really good. I've been listening to it a lot over the past week while getting ready for this episode. Probably my favorite song in the game. But that feels like cheating in a way. But this song is extremely good, and also kind of reflects that, from what I can tell, Fatal Frame 2 does not have what one would call a happy ending. So, yeah.
I feel like at least the part that you hear in the clip is probably something I would hear more of, like, on my own, with that kind of J-rock sound. It's really good, actually, but yeah, puts a bow on the story, I'm sure, in some way, but does it represent the experience you've just had? Maybe yes, maybe no. Hard to say, but yeah, it's interesting to hear different credit songs from different games, as we've heard, certainly, even in just the past several weeks, and how it tries to put a bow on all of that.
And to find out that, like, this started them having their own, like, artist that works on the series traditionally.
Yeah.
And the only one that she didn't work on, as far as I'm aware, or no, she did work on it. She did a song for Fatal Frame 5. It's just that somebody else also did a song for Fatal Frame 5. And that's the only example outside of one that she did not, like, have a part in that song. So that's really interesting to me. And she even apparently wrote a new song for the Wii remake of this game. So that's she's still in there, which is very, very neat. But getting back into creepy atmosphere, tracks in the cutting room floor, I got two of them. One of them is here because I think it's the final boss. I think, based on YouTube comments, I don't know. This is Sai. That is the name Sai, not the word Sai. So not S-I-G-H, it's S-A-E, as in Sai Nijima.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of thing. I believe she is, like, the closest the game has to a main antagonist, from the little I can tell from not reading the whole plot summary. Because, I want to play the game at some point. But as far as I can tell, she seems to be the final boss. And your performance against her is one of the main factors that decides what ending you're going to get. The reason it's in the cutting room floor is that I don't find it as creepy or interesting as some of the stuff I put in the Critical 5. But if it's the final boss theme, I mean, why not? But it's just sort of, it feels more like your standard atmospheric thing. And I'm kind of surprised, if it is the final boss, that there aren't whispers or something baked into this song like the others.
I think that's a perfect assessment after listening to this song. Though, a final boss with choices involving someone named Sai that determines what kind of ending you get? Persona 5, baby! Like, Nijima comes back one way or the other.
Getting some Persona 5 vibes off of...
I mean, not the music, obviously, but when you thematically tie it together like that, yeah.
The other track of the cutting room floor is another song where I hear it and think, that's not Fatal Frame. What? No. But this one doesn't remind me of Fire Emblem. It reminds me of a different game. This is Survival. This is the music for the Xbox exclusive survival mode that was added in the director's cut. This is a Metal Gear song. I think of Metal Gear when I hear this.
And I was thinking about that, but it's definitely a more moody Metal Gear piece, if at all. Mm-hmm. I feel like it's the hits, like the strings maybe give it a little more Metal Gear, but I feel like the percussion hits that are going on and the kind of reverberation going on there take me to Silent Hill.
I guess, yeah, I could hear that. The combination of the word survival and then some of the instrumentation just sort of, my brain immediately goes to, this is something I'd hear as like a track that didn't get included in the main soundtrack of Snake Eater.
like a VR missions kind of thing or something like that. Well, at least it's not Metal Gear Survive, so there's that.
Yeah, there is that. I think it's a neat song, but it's mainly here because it was another one that had me do a double take and think, did I get moved to a different soundtrack? Am I still in Fatal Frame 2? And it turns out, yes, I am.
Well, it's also a neat little addition for just the extra mode. Give a shout out to the Xbox version.
So what will I never forget about Fatal Frame 2? I don't really have anything that I can't forget about it yet. I would very much like to play it. In fact, I acquired a copy pretty much right after doing the research for this because, I want to try it. I kind of hope they re-release other Fatal Frame games, but I have a feeling the only reason 4 and 5 are re-releasing so easily is because those were the two that were A, published by Nintendo, and B, on Nintendo systems exclusively beforehand. Otherwise, the rest of them were all PlayStation 2, and I don't know the rights situation on that. I have no idea, but getting the other three, I think, would be neat and good, especially because they're basically inaccessible now unless you own a PS3.
And that's wild, and we need better game preservation. I think it's really interesting that my game that I'll talk about here shortly is also a game that I haven't played yet, but I'd like to play, especially after doing research, and that's always a good sign. We love that. And also, if it's Neil Druckmann approved, I'm good with that as well.
So, for our transition, I'd like to cover a fan remix fan cover. There are a lot of covers of Cho, which, fun fact, is how I found out the song existed, because it is not on any of the game rips, probably because of fears of getting pulled down for copyright.
Well, we're rolling the dice on our podcast then, I guess.
I mean, it is a pop song. It is on YouTube in a couple of places, but, it's not on the soundtrack that people upload to YouTube fully. So I found out this song existed by Googling Fatal Frame 2 cover and getting a bunch of covers of Cho. So thank you, Internet, for that. And I found, of course, a bunch of great vocalists doing it. But the one that caught my ear the most, and this will not surprise anybody, was a piano cover of Cho. No vocals, admittedly, but I still really, really liked this arrangement of it. And it was played by the YouTuber Dave Peppiatt. That's Peppiatt. And I think it translates very well to piano. And I think it's a very, very pretty song when transliterated to that. So enjoy that. We'll be right back.
Well, thanks to thin hotel walls, I have to turn down my presentation energy a lot this week, which is tough because for this game, there's a lot to talk about, and not only a lot of different interesting little nuggets of development history, but also a lot of games inside Kirby Super Star. Not the first time we've talked about Kirby on this show. We had the aforementioned Kirby's Epic Yarn and Devil May Cry 3 episode in episode 6. Kirby 64, The Crystal Shards, was discussed in episode 24. And most recently, Kirby's Adventure was discussed in episode 165 of original Soundchat. But Hoshinokabi Super Deluxe, released on March 21st, 1996 on Super Famicom in Japan, like 3 months before Nintendo 64 would be released. North America would have to wait until September 20th, 1996 to get Kirby Super Star on Super Nintendo. And PAL regions would get the game known as Kirby's Fun Pack. That's PAK for pack. Kirby's Fun Pack on January 23rd, 1997.
What the hell was it with Nintendo in the 90s and naming things pack, P-A-K?
It's like GAC. It was just a very 90s thing, I think. I don't know. An enhanced remake titled Kirby Super Star Ultra was released for the Nintendo DS in 2008. The original Kirby Super Star was released on Wii and Wii U Virtual Console in 2009 and 2013 respectively, and it's also part of the Kirby Dream Collection, which was the 20th anniversary compilation for the franchise, and that game released on Wii in 2012. But if you want to play Kirby Super Star today, the best place to do so would be on the Nintendo Switch Online collection of Super Nintendo games. So go check out Kirby Super Star there. I know I want to. I really want to, actually. The game is developed by HAL Laboratory and published by Nintendo. Kirby Super Star is a 2D side-scrolling platformer, where you probably know what a Kirby game is, but in general, Kirby's modes of attack are inhaling enemies or objects to either spit them back out or gain their powers as copy abilities. If Kirby uses a copy ability, in this game he can produce a helper, a character that can be controlled automatically or by another player. It's in fact the first time that co-op play was introduced to the Kirby series. Like Kirby, helpers can float continuously, but can only use the copy ability that they were based on. The player can also grant the helper a different form, or revert them into a power-up in an emergency. Kirby Superstar is unique because right there on the package, on the box art, there are 8 games in this one package. There are 6 primary games, there's 1 supplemental, and 1 sub-game that's made up of 2 mini-games. So normally, there would be a singular plot to break down. Not so much with this game, so let's kind of do a little summary of all of the games that are part of Kirby Superstar. So for one, there's Spring Breeze, which is an abridged remake of the first Kirby game, Kirby's Dream Land from 1992. It has the gameplay enhancements of Kirby Superstar, but the gist is Kirby must make his way to a castle to challenge King Dedede, who has stolen the food from the citizens of Dreamland. Several levels from the original game have been merged, while some boss fights were cut. There's Dynablade, where Kirby must stop Dynablade, a giant bird, from disturbing Dreamland's crops. The mode consists of 4 levels that the player must clear before facing off against Dynablade. There are also 2 secret areas and a mini-boss that moves around the world map. Also famously, there is Gourmet Race, a racing game in which Kirby races King Dedede while eating as much food as possible. It takes place across 3 levels of varying length, and whoever earns the most points by the end of all levels wins, with bonus points awarded to the first to finish each race. If you may remember from Super Smash Bros. For Wii U, there is The Great Cave Offensive, which is a Metroidvania adventure that sees Kirby explore a cave for treasure. There are 60 treasure chests that are hidden across 4 areas, and some treasures reference other Nintendo franchises, while others reference valuable items that appear in other role-playing games, such as Orichalcum. There is Revenge of Meta Knight, a story-driven mode chronicling Kirby's efforts to stop Meta Knight, who attempts to take over Dreamland and end the inhabitants' lazy lifestyle by invading in his signature airship, the battleship Halberd. Each level has a time limit and involves boss fights. The Halberd takes damage after every level, and a meter at the bottom of the screen shows the ship's status. Probably the most notable one of these main primary games is Milky Way Wishes. It's the largest mode in the game, and the idea is because the sun and moon around planet Popstar are fighting, a jester-like creature named Marx tells Kirby he must travel across 9 planets and restore the giant wish-granting comet clock, Nova. Unlike the other modes, though, Kirby cannot use copy abilities. Instead, he collects Copy Essence Deluxes. Once these are in Kirby's possession, they allow the player to select a copy ability from a list, and they're kept permanently. This mode also involves scrolling shooter levels. But yes, that boss fight against Marx is well known as probably the most singular, notable mode in this game. If we had to say, what's the big question? Can Kirby figure out what's going on with Marx and Nova and all of this? So those are your 6 big primary games. Those would be Spring Breeze, Dynablade, Gourmet Race, The Great Cave Offensive, Revenge of Meta Knight, and Milky Way Wishes. There's also The Arena, which is just a boss attack mode that challenges the player to fight every boss in the game with only 1 life and a free selection of a power-up at the start of the game. The player can replenish their health up to 5 times total between rounds. That sounds familiar for a Masahiro Sakurai game, and they're granted 2 power-ups at random. And then there's the Sub-Games game, which includes 2 mini-games that can be played single-player or multiplayer. They include Samurai Kirby, a timing game reminiscent of a mini-game from Kirby's Adventure from 1993, and Megaton Punch, where players must punch a block, and Planet Popstar, if the punch is strong enough, you must punch a block stronger than their opponent. Whew, that's all of them. That's it. Joe, all of that being said, what are our experiences with Kirby Super Star?
It is a game I'm going to have to play. Specifically, I'm going to have to play Kirby Super Star Ultra. It's not that I don't want to play it. It's just I've never gotten around to it. But Kirby Super Star Ultra is the game Smasherbeats has picked out for Meta Knight, specifically because of the presence of Meta Knight's Revenge. Or was that what it was? I've already forgotten what it was. That's what it's called. Revenge of Meta Knight. See, I almost had the name.
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. Japanese is silly.
Yeah, that's the reason we're playing it for Meta Knight specifically, which I believe will be the last Kirby game we play.
Whoa.
Which is because we've already done Adventure and 64, and those were the only other 2. Oh boy. Oh boy. But yeah, I've never played Kirby Super Star, and even though it is on the NSO app, I don't feel like I can go play it now, because I kind of want my first playthrough to be on stream for the podcast. I think whenever I can do that, I kind of want to do that. So we'll see how that goes. But I know of Superstar, and I know of a lot of stuff in Superstar, so there's at least that. Like, a lot of the stuff in this game is famous.
Oh, for sure. I feel like it's one of the definitive Kirby experiences. It's the last one that Masahiro Sakurai directed. So there's that. There's a lot that carries over into Kirby lineage, and not only that, but Sakurai's other games like Super Smash Brothers. So certainly a lot to note about Kirby Superstar. I almost brought my Switch with me on this work trip, and if I did, I'd be like, yeah, let's pick up Kirby Superstar, see how far I can get before recording this episode. That did not happen. So the more I did research, though, the more I liked what I was learning, and I'm like, yeah, I should definitely give it a try. I feel like I knew that there were several games in Kirby Superstar, but not to this degree. So that was pretty neat to learn about. And even though that this was a Super Nintendo Entertainment System title, Kirby Super Star's prototype, its original concept, was developed for the original NES. Though development on this game lasted longer than usual, than most games for the era, and it took 3 years to make this game. There was like a whole stopping point, especially because of Donkey Kong Country, with like the idea of CG graphics and can we mix this into the background? Well, the team doesn't have much experience with it. A whole thing to do with that really slowed down development. And as a result, this released very late in the Super Nintendo's life cycle. For Kirby Superstar, as Masahiro Sakurai noted on his YouTube channel, though other sources flush this out a little bit more, Masahiro Sakurai had 3 pillars in mind for the game. One was 2-player cooperative gameplay, and another one was including actions similar to those in fighting games. But the third was an omnibus format. So let's break each of those down. The addition of co-op gameplay was something that Shigeru Miyamoto requested. So Masahiro Sakurai and then president of HAL Laboratory, Satoru Iwata, visited Miyamoto in Kyoto. Co-op platformers were pretty uncommon at the time, especially for Nintendo and their platforms, and Miyamoto actually wanted his Super Mario series to have this feature, but found Mario's gameplay to be too quick to adapt this feature just yet. But Kirby's platforming is slower, so Sakurai, you can make this work. And he says, oh, it's a tall task, but he's up to it. And he comes up with this system that, the screen moves with Kirby, but his helper, if you get far enough off screen, will kind of warp Star back to Kirby to help out. It works out, and I think it's a lot better than like when you compare to Sonic the Hedgehog, early 2D Sonic the Hedgehog games, where if Tails goes off screen, he comes and flies in slowly and awkwardly. That doesn't help all that much, but a quick warp back, that can be quite helpful. As for including the fighting game-like moves, Sakurai made enemies stronger, and he did this because, quote, the main player would simply hurl blades and lay waste to opponents while the helper just watched. Additionally, he expanded copy abilities as possibilities so players could perform multiple actions by pressing the same button, which is similar to fighting games. Do you give command prompts? Possible that might help. Also, this game was the first in the series in which Kirby's appearance changed depending on his copy ability. Gained some different hats, which in his YouTube video, Sakurai notes how this became a huge headache for when this was applied to the Super Smash Bros. Series. The omnibus format, though, was chosen because Sakurai noted that most SNES and some NES games were getting to be of considerable length and that prices were high for games. So Kirby Superstar served as the antithesis to that trend, with Sakurai hoping to create sections with different stories and gameplay that appealed to both experienced and inexperienced players. A couple notes on these games, though. Sakurai originally wanted Spring Breeze to not feature any copy abilities like the original Kirby's Dream Land did, in order to introduce the basic gameplay to new players. However, he was pressured into adding copy abilities by a producer. There was another primary game that was planned. It was cut due to space and RAM limitations, and it was called Kagero Mansion. This was a horror game with an emphasis on action and puzzle elements, and saw Kirby stuck in a mansion with his mouth sewn up and he's unable to inhale.
What the hell? I want to see what that would have looked like.
Right? It kind of feels like it might have been a little Resident Evil-like also for 1996. The game's original working title was Kirby of the Stars, or Hoshinokabi Active, which suggests that the game was more proactive and had more active gameplay, though Mother series creator Shigesato Itoi came up with the final title, which, Sakurai said, conveys how rich it is in content. Kirby Super Star reviewed very well at the time, with a game rankings average of 86%. Critics applauded the large amount of content, simultaneous two-player mode, the graphics, and Kirby's power-absorbing ability. The game sold 1 million copies in Japan, and it's estimated that it sold 1.44 million total. Electronic Gaming Monthly named Kirby Super Star a runner-up for Side-Scrolling Game of the Year. I guess it lost to Guardian Heroes. And Games Radar ranked the game at number 19 in their best SNES game of all time. The legacy of Kirby Superstar, well, there was that Superstar Ultra remake, and it features 4 new modes, 3 new minigames, and multiple additions to the base game, including new sub-bosses and enemies, and it sold 3 million copies on Nintendo DS. Of course, there are a lot of Super Smash Bros. Inclusions and references, including Battleship Halberd as a stage in Brawl, and the Great Cave Offensive as a stage in the Wii U game.
At the worst Smash stage, one might say.
Oh, yeah, Great Cave Offensive is no bueno, especially with its danger blast zones.
I hate that stage so much. It is one of the, 2 stages that I will straight up refuse to play on.
That's fair, honestly. The composer that we'll talk about this week. So last week I said we'll talk about Tadashi Ikegami. And he did an arrangement on the Superstar Ultra soundtrack. So I'm like, I get that's what we have to pick. Obviously, Jun Ishikawa did the music for Kirby Superstar, right? Not necessarily. It turns out that there was another composer credited alongside Jun Ishikawa, and his name is Don Miyakawa. So Don Miyakawa was born on June 12th, 1971 in Tokyo, Japan. He is blood type B. He also has gone by an alias of Daniels. And he is a Japanese composer, arranger, musician, saxophonist, and keyboardist. He graduated from Waseda University in 1994, and around this time he joined a band called Love Tambourines as the keyboardist. After the dissolution of Love Tambourines, he worked as a producer, arranger, songwriter, and support musician. It was also around this time that he worked at HAL Laboratory for a very short period of time, and it is unknown exactly what his role was, or if his work even made it into Kirby Superstar, and yet his name is credited in the game. So, go figure on that one. In October 2006, he released a solo album alongside some guest vocalists as Miyagawa Dan Ensemble. In January 2008, he released his second solo album, Neuromancer. So, the discography of Dan Miyakawa for video games, it includes Kirby Superstar, and for Suikoden Tierkreis, which is a game on DS, he did the arrangement of its opening theme, Tears in the Sky. He seems to be an arranger and lyricist for anime music today, and some of these titles include Chobits, Cardcaptor Sakura Clear Card, and Reborn to Master the Blade, From Hero King to Extraordinary Squire. I don't know what that one is, I just found the title very amusing.
Yeah, I'm not 100% what that sounds familiar, but it's not an anime I've watched or would watch based on the title.
Watch it be like a Japanese title that are like, oh yeah, and it just translates really weirdly.
Oh no, that's how light novels are titled. All of them. All of them. It's awful.
So for the Kirby Superstar soundtrack, it is composed by Jun Ishikawa and Dan Miyakawa. As I mentioned, we have Tadashi Ikegami. He's also credited for doing an arrangement on the Ultra soundtrack, and also on that same soundtrack, Hirokazu Ando is also involved. I mean, that makes sense. Also a big HAL musician. According to research on Dan Miyakawa, for Kirby Superstar, Dan either used or had his compositions converted to HAL Laboratory's version of Nintendo's Kankichi-kun sound driver. And the game uses the second version of this sound driver. So what does the music in Kirby Super Star sound like? Well, let's just say it involves a lot of well-known Kirby themes, especially if you know music from other Sakurai projects like Super Smash Bros. So let's get into it, the 5 critical tracks for Kirby Super Star. And this first one, we've got to start out with Together with the Spring Breeze. Just immediately an introduction that gets you right into it, and such a catchy melody. It's one that I hear and I'm like, I have never played this game, and yet I know this. I think this is like the title screen for the Spring Breeze mode, which is really interesting because if you go back to the Kirby's Dream Land soundtrack, because of course it's the weird remake of Dream Land, this theme is the ending credits theme in the original Kirby's Dream Land. Of course, just all arranged nicely and spruced up with these SNES instruments. But yeah, what a catchy tune that, I'm sure evokes nostalgia for those that had just played Kirby's Dream Land several years earlier. But for it to be a very easily identifiable song right from the Spring Breeze Easy mode, one of the many games here in Kirby Super Star, one that just catches your ear immediately.
And it is the most Kirby that has ever Kirby. This is the tone of Kirby.
Yes, 100%.
This is essentially what I am at. Like, obviously, it's not this song. When I picture Kirby, I think of Gourmet Racer, Green Greens, personally. But this definitely has the joyful, fun, carefree tone that I expect from a Kirby game soundtrack. It's very good.
Let's get into some more easily identifiable Kirby tracks, though, here from Kirby Super Star. And number 2 on the Critical 5 is just a classic character theme, and it's King DDD. Oh yes, if you've played Super Smash Bros. Brawl, if you have extensive knowledge of that soundtrack, the King DDD theme is well known to you, but of course, originally used as Mount DDD in Kirby's Dream Land. This arrangement is so fun, so energetic, when it's really the theme for the villain in that original game, and a great theme that it is, but wow, you can only think of, the other interpretations that it's taken over time, because the DDD theme is just a classic for Kirby, right? It's not the last time you're going to hear this theme, even in, my gosh, the most recent Kirby in the Forgotten Land. Like, the DDD theme gets an epic treatment there, as you may have heard in our Best of 2022. Like, it's a classic theme for sure. And for this to get the 16-bit audio treatment on Super Nintendo, great to hear this version of the song.
No version is ever going to beat Yoko Shimomura's Brawl remix, in my mind, ever. It's just too good. But I actually did not know this song was in Kirby Super Star. I know of it, obviously, but I did not know it was in this specific game. So that's good. You are right. This is a classic song. And you are right. The version in Forgotten Land is also absolutely fantastic. But yeah, it's just a classic theme, a very classic theme, and one of the better, boss themes in the series? Because isn't it also, it's not DDD, but isn't it also like the original DDD boss theme, I think, too?
Probably. I would guess so without playing it, yeah.
Yeah, I've also never played the original. I mean, I could now if I wanted, I guess. It's on NSO. But I think so. I believe it is that as well.
If we're talking about classic Kirby themes, though, I don't think there's any that beats number 3 on their Critical 5, and that is Gourmet Race. This also gets titled Run, Kirby, Run, because it's what you do in the Gourmet Race mode, whether you're racing against DDD or a ghost of the race that you've created for yourself to race against. Kirby's throwing those little nubs back, doing his little ninja run to collect food throughout the course, and man, what a great quintessential Kirby theme. Whether it's getting remixed in, later games or getting put to punch, Falcon, punch from Super Smash Bros. On Nintendo 64. Just a wonderful Kirby theme. Obviously, this track had to be in a Critical 5 for Kirby Super Star.
I mean, yeah, this is the Kirby song. And to be fair, it is the Kirby song because of Smash. Because for a while it was the only Kirby song you could hear in Smash outside of Green Greens in Melee. Like, Melee had 2 versions of this song. It's the one. And I think there's a very good reason for that. It's one of the most catchy damn songs there's ever been in a video game. And the pace is a lot of fun to listen to. And man, just Gourmet Race is such a good song. I really, really love this piece. In every version it's ever been in.
There is something to the energetic version of this piece, but yeah, when you get the dramatic orchestral rendition in Fountain of Dreams, like, there's just maybe no beating that one, but...
So iconic that apparently in the remake of Kirby's Adventure, being Nightmare in Dreamland, they replaced what originally played at the Fountain of Dreams with that song.
Wow.
With that version of Gourmet Race. It was not originally the song that played at the Fountain of Dreams. I did not know that until we did Adventure 4 Masterpieces when Matt told me that.
It's pretty wild, but you got to pay respects to the classics. Another classic is here at number 4 on the Critical 5 for Kirby Super Star, and this one is called Halberd. So to all my Super Smash Bros. Music nerds out there, how wild is it to hear this song brought back into its original 16-bit version instead of the version that you know from Super Smash Bros. Brawl?
It's a weird transition to not have this be more jazzy than it already is. That is the first time I ever heard this song was on the dojo. The little, clip that was posted one of the days. And I genuinely actually don't think I've ever heard the original version until now.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, isn't it? But you hear all the instruments and it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense for the time. Of course, this plays in the Revenge of Meta Knight mode when you're on the battleship Halberd. And of course, we would come to know this song as Meta Knight's Revenge, thanks to Super Smash Bros. Brawl. But yeah, wow, as we'll get to the transition theme, the outro theme, obviously this song also plays a big role in the game and its legacy moving forward. But yeah, wow, I was flipping through this game's soundtrack thinking like, oh, look at that, Meta Knight's Revenge song is also in this game. I wonder where it shows up. And I guess it makes sense for it to be Halberd, but yeah, I too, I had never heard the original before, and wow, it's great, and I can see why it was, taken to so many remixes. Number 5, though, let's wrap up the Critical 5, and let's bring in that climactic boss showdown that has also had its music spun into some Super Smash Bros. Yarn, and this is Marks. For the great covers of Marks that are out there, once again, it is nice to hear the original. And this, of course, comes from Milky Way Wishes, where, surprise, Marks is really the final boss, and he planned this whole thing all along, and he's secretly crazy. And I feel like this piece does a really good job of, like similar bosses of similar instability, like, say, Kefka from Final Fantasy VI. The music does a really good job of just like keeping you off kilter and maybe messing with some time signatures or making you feel like there's some shifting time signatures there. Again, other remixes have done a great job to modernize this piece and make it sound great with new instruments, but just a really nice piece of work here on the original Super Nintendo, Super Famicom, with these instruments at play, and it just sounds so good and unsettling for a final boss theme.
So, like, the joke that people like to make is, like, Kirby is a god that just doesn't kind of realize that he's a god and is one of the most powerful creatures in the universe and just kind of doesn't know or care. He just wants to eat cake. I've heard it described as Marks is that, but very aware of what he is. And also insane. So Kefka is a very good comparison, I feel like. And yeah, from what I understand, at least based on the Smash boss, this is a very fitting song for Marks. It's, I don't know anything about the dude, but people really, really like him, and this song is very interesting for a Kirby boss song, and I don't know what else to say, but eventually I will learn about Marks, I guess.
For tracks on the cutting room floor, I just had so many that I figured, you know what, Joe, you could probably handle a couple. What do you have here?
Well, the first one I got is Candy Mountain. This apparently plays in the 4th level in Dynablade. What it reminds me of, the first thing I think of when I start listening to the song is first you draw a circle, then you dot the I's. It's the thing teaching you how to draw Kirby at the beginning of Kirby's Adventure. I don't know why that's the tone that it gives me, but this is very, very reminiscent of stuff that I think of when I think about Kirby 64. Like, a lot of the same instrumentation. In fact, I could picture this playing on top of a specific level in Kirby 64 even, so that is very interesting to me. But yeah, very high energy. Again, very Kirby.
100%. Yeah, and it's apparently notable as far as YouTube comments go. It's like big in meme community and culture, and being referenced in different places. Obviously, Candy Mountain, we're not doing Charlie the Unicorn here, but this song is apparently quite a standout from this game, and it is super high energy, so I could see why it is catchy and appealing.
And the other track on the cutting room floor that we have on my side is Safe Hut. Huh, that sounds familiar. Almost like that is the music for the All-Star lobby in Melee.
Yeah.
Which is probably where most people listening heard it for the first time.
What a throwback for Smash fans to go back and be like, Sakurai, you clever fox.
The fact that that is not mentioned ever is wild to me. I didn't know that until today. So that is the fact that is not something people point out as a piece of trivia all the time, and that it's not credited as being from Kirby Super Star is absolutely wild to me. It's hilarious.
Fun little bit of trivia there. For me, I have 2 tracks on the cutting room floor as well. The first of these is Boss Battle. For as many times as I feel like you battle bosses in this game, just random bosses that don't get their own theme, you're probably hearing the song quite a lot, so it's very important in that regard. Also, the Smash music enthusiast in me is like, oh, I've totally heard that dun 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 dun. It's that boss medley theme in Kirby music starting in Brawl. So yeah, it totally makes sense that this carries its way over into that as well to be another musical legacy piece from this game. But yeah, again, if you're going to face so many bosses, probably a pretty important piece to bring up, at the very least on the cutting room floor.
This isn't one of my favorite Kirby boss themes, to be honest. I think it's a little too simple. A little too repetitive. It's hard to beat all of the Kirby 64 boss themes for me, and then, Forgotten Land brought it hard, which is incredible still. But yeah, I don't know. This one I kind of find underwhelming, just kind of in general. I also recognize that one part of the Kirby boss medley from Brawl, and now understand why that's the one part in the Kirby boss medley for Brawl. Because it's the only part of the song.
Absolutely. And then the other one I have on my cutting room floor, this is Marshmallow Castle. Just a really funky piece that I feel like comes out of nowhere for a Kirby game. But wow, a lot of cool stuff happening here with the different instruments on Super Nintendo. Some syncopated swing rhythm is also super hard to program. And so I'm very impressed at the sound of this at this time on SNES.
This is like the theme I would picture would play in Kirby's Drunk.
Right?
And that's really weird to say. It sounds like, haha, what if Kirby was edgy and got drunk? No, this sounds like Kirby's, the sliding notes feel like being drunk. I can't think of anything else. It's delightful, but also, really, it sounds like music that plays when you touch Fuzzy Get Dizzy in Super Mario World 2.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, I think that's a fair comparison.
That's all I could think of. It's hilarious to me.
So what will I never forget about Kirby Super Star, or Kirby's Fun Pack, or Hoshinokabi Super Deluxe? You know what? The idea that there are this many games inside it, the omnibus, as it were, with the 6 main games, the arena of the boss rush, and then the 2 mini games kind of lumped into one sub games thing. I mean, now I want to go play it. If it's like really accessible and it's one of the definitive Kirby experiences, and granted, my recent Kirby experiences, it's like, oh, I like playing this, but I feel like I don't want to see it through to the end. Like it's a long slog. Well, if Sakurai just is like, let's make a bunch of short games, I could be pretty down for that. And also just so many great themes in this game that, yeah, when you hear other takes on it, just kind of creates new memories for you. So to go back and hear these classics is actually nice and refreshing.
I'll play it eventually. Maybe in like 2 years, 2.5 at most.
And you'll hear how the DS version sounds different than the Super Nintendo.
Which will be interesting in its own right, honestly. But yeah, I look forward to getting there. But it's going to be a little while before we get there. We're still in the GBA and the GameCube. It's going to be a little bit.
What a collection of games. These 2 games, or even the games within the games, with these titles that are different across the 3 major regions, with Fatal Frame 2 Crimson Butterfly and Kirby Super Star, just for those North American titles alone. Great soundtracks, very different soundtracks, but great ones nonetheless. And that will do it for us this week on Original Soundchat. You can find me at Pete Speakeasy on Twitter. Joe is over at String Pixel. The video version of the show is on the Rhymes with Asia YouTube channel, but it's that MP3 podcast version that you want. And that's hosted by Anonymous Dinosaur at anondino.squarespace.com. That's where Joe's other podcast, Smasher Pieces, is hosted. And you can find Smasher Pieces and Original Soundchat wherever you get your podcasts. Catchers all around the globe, from Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, to Spotify, where not only do we have a feed of podcast episodes, but we have a playlist of video game music, where if we talk about a video game music track on this show and it's on Spotify, it gets added to this big monster playlist. Joe, what's being added this week?
So Kirby, obviously, no, it's not. It's not on Spotify. Fatal Frame also is not, because as I mentioned, I don't think this game ever got an official soundtrack release. I'm not sure any of them did, to be perfectly honest. But Cho is on Spotify, so I guess that'll get added? Sure.
We'll take one track. That's good. When you're done listening to all of that, you can find the show on social media at Soundchat OST, where you can leave some feedback for us. How are we doing with these episodes? What do we miss on our Critical 5? And give us some suggestions for games to cover in the future. Speaking of which, Joe, who are we talking about next week?
I'm going to talk about Grant Graham.
And I'll be talking about Satoshi Igarashi. All right, to play us out, I mentioned that there is another big piece of legacy from this game as it concerns music, and that is brought to us from the 8-Bit Big Band, who, if you may remember, did a cover of Meta Knight's Revenge, or the Halberd theme, and they did this fusion big band version featuring Button Masher. They put it up on YouTube, and then it got nominated for a Grammy in 2022 for the category of Best Arrangement, Instrumental, or A Cappella. And then the Grammys rolled around, and then they won that Grammy for a cover of Meta Knight's Revenge from the 8-Bit Big Band, and it sounds just as good as you might expect. So please enjoy that. Thank you so much for listening this week on Original Soundchat. We'll see you next time. Take care.